Okay. So now I'm going to hand over to the Clares, please. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and talk to us also a little bit about what you guys do at the Carers Trust and how you're here to support us as parent carers, because I know that you offer an absolutely fabulous service.
Thanks for that. Yeah, really appreciate you inviting us to talk about benefits and support for parent carers. My name's Clare Crerand. I'm a parent carer support worker. I'm based in our Cheshire office. I'm also joined by my colleague, also called Claire, same spelling. It does get confusing. And Claire is based in the Crewe office, but she also covers our Northwich and Winsford area as well, supporting unpaid parent carers. Just a little intro. We are from Cheshire Warrington Carers Trust. We've been commissioned by Cheshire Warrington Cheshire West and Chester Council to provide support to unpaid carers. In addition to this, recently we received some government money through the COVID-19 project to specifically support parent carers by offering additional support. So we'll go through that towards the end of this presentation. Just to let you know that we do not work for Department of Work and Pensions, but we do spend an awful lot of time helping and supporting carers with their disability benefits. Tonight, we're going to be sharing with you information that we've gathered over the years from both our experience supporting carers with their benefits and also from feedback that we've received from them as well. Can you move to the next slide, please? Okay. Oh, that's it. So, just to let you know what we're going to be covering tonight, we're going to be looking very briefly at disability living allowance. Then we're going to be moving towards personal independent payments. We'll also be considering mandatory reconsiderations and what that entails. We'll be learning about disabled students allowance, carers credit, Cheshire West Blue Badge Scheme, Cheshire West Council Tax Reduction Scheme. And then we'll be going briefly through other support from Cheshire Warrington Carers Trust available to you as parent carer. And then we're going to share some links and contact details, links of websites that we found that have been really good over the years. Okay, and the next slide, please. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Claire for the next bit.
Hi everyone. Yes, my name's Clare Gallagher, and I'm based in the Crewe office, but as Claire pointed out, I do cover some work in Winsford and Northwich as well, so obviously hence why I'm here tonight. The first benefit we're going to be talking about is the disability living allowance, obviously commonly known as DLA. I'm not going to talk a great deal about this because I'm sure it's probably the benefit that most people know most about, particularly if you have a child or young person with special educational needs or disabilities. So again, it's very brief. If any of you watching, either now or on YouTube or anything else, are new to their caring role, Claire will be talking about quite a lot of resources that we can offer at the end. And also, if you do need support in completing the DLA or any of the other things that we're talking about tonight, our contact details will be made available, and obviously you can contact us for more help and support with those. So very briefly then, the DLA, like many of the other benefits we're going to be talking about, is tax-free and non-means tested. The major criteria is that the child needs to be under 16. After the age of 16, or from 16 onwards, PIP takes over, which Claire will be talking about in a moment. And the main thing is that the child must need extra care or have walking difficulties, which are over and above that of a child of a similar age. People ask, when can you actually start applying for DLA? Well, basically, it says one of the criteria is that the child must have had the difficulties for at least 3 months, and expected to last for at least 6 months. So obviously then, presumably it would be 3 months plus, but there doesn't seem to be anywhere that you can actually access that information. The other criteria is if a medical professional has said that the child has less than 6 months to live. The weekly rates vary from year to year, as with all benefits. And with DLA, there are two components. There's the care component, which has 3 levels to it: a lower level, a middle level, and a higher level. You can see the rates on the screen. The higher level is currently £92.40 a week, and that would be for a child that needs support not just during the day, but also during the night as well. And that could be for a whole host of reasons, which obviously I'm not going to go into. Some of you obviously may be familiar with that and have children that are receiving the higher rate. The other component is the mobility component, and with this there are just 2 levels. It's a little bit more complex with the mobility component because there's quite a lot of variation in when children begin to walk and move about. So the higher rate, which is currently £64.50 a week, can be claimed for a child from the age of 3. Because, like, as I said, there's a lot of variation with children's mobility up until that age. For a child, obviously, to get that level at that age, they will probably have significant physical disability and or medical conditions that would obviously impede their mobility. Once a child is 5, they can apply for the lower rate, which is £24.45 currently, and that, I'm going to say typically, because there's no such thing as a typical child, but for our own experience, that tends to be children perhaps with what we would perhaps term as hidden disabilities. Maybe they have little concept of danger when they're outside, run out in front of cars, and they need constant supervision whenever they're outside. It is that type of thing. So who can claim? Well, anyone who's got parental responsibility for the child, a parent or a guardian. You can either request a form from the DWP, which will be backdated, but be prepared for a very long wait. As you know, when you're in a call, waiting for a call on a call from the DWP can take a very long time. You can complete a printable form via the government website, but it will eat into your ink cartridge capability quite significantly because they're pretty hefty forms. And if you wanted to print out the guidance notes as well, so from that point of view, it is sometimes a bit easier to request it directly from the DWP because the guidance notes are included. So the form itself is quite weighty, but as I said, if you do feel you want some support with that, we're there to help you with that. However, it is fairly straightforward, and there are guidance notes, as I said, with it and also on the form itself. Just read very carefully before you complete that. You send the form off. You'll receive a letter in about a week to 10 days to say that it's been accepted and being considered, and then you will receive eventually, maybe I can't exactly say because it varies a lot, but maybe between 4 to 6 weeks, you will get then the letter to say whether they've awarded DLA and at what level. If you disagree with that decision, that could be for many reasons, you can then request what's called a mandatory reconsideration and then even possibly go to appeal. Claire's going to be talking a little bit more about that after she's talked about PIP, and that relates to DLA as well. Okay, so can I have the next slide, please?
Okay, so personal independent payment is probably sort of the one benefit that causes people anxiety or more anxiety. It's just the thought of approaching sometimes for people. However, hopefully after this little bit here, you'll probably feel a lot better about the benefit. So if your child is already in receipt of DLA, you will be getting a letter as they approach the age of 16 inviting them to apply for personal independent payments. Please can I encourage you not to think, oh, I'll do this another time. We are aware of a small number of carers who actually their DLA stopped because they didn't apply for this. So it's really important that you do action that letter. Either way, both if you are applying to follow on from DLA, or if you're applying sort of without having any previous benefits, you would claim by making a telephone call initially. It's about 10 minutes long, and that is to gather some mostly administrative information. You are not required to talk anything about the medical conditions. They will ask for information such as your GP details, banking details. However, it's really important that you do have the person that you're claiming the personal independent payment for there. It might be that they are not able to take part in the call. However, they will be asked to give permission for you to speak on their behalf. So it is important that they are there. And there's a couple of questions throughout that 10 minutes that they will be asked a yes or no question. Okay, so the criteria for this benefit is that they have to be over 16 years of age and under state pension age. They must have a long-term physical or mental health condition or disability, and have difficulty with certain day-to-day tasks, or have difficulty getting around, or they can have both. It should be expected that the difficulty is to last at least 12 months from when they started, or that medical professional has indicated they may have less than 6 months to live. Unlike DLA, the daily living component only has 2 different levels. They have the standard and the enhanced levels, and that's the same for the moving around component as well. So daily living is equivalent of the care component of DLA, and moving around is your mobility. Okay, can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so don't worry, I'm not expecting you to sort of read carefully the middle of this screen. However, I felt it was really important to share this with you because a lot of the carers that we support have found it really helpful and beneficial in preparing before they actually get going with filling the form in, just to see what levels they are likely to receive for their application. You may already know that this benefit is assessed very differently from DLA, and it's a points system. So the person applying is awarded certain number of points depending on the ability and how much help is needed for a variety of tasks. That is for both the daily living component and the moving around component. So what I would normally say if I met with a carer, I would say sort of normally give them or give them a copy of this or direct them to it. And this is the Citizens Advice PIP descriptors, and there's a link at the end of this, so for you to be able to access. We'd look through it, and for each element we would see what would be the most appropriate scoring for the person that was going to apply for personal independent payment. And then from that we could get an idea. So you would be needing to score 8 or more points for the standard level of the benefits. That is both the daily living component and the moving around component. And for the enhanced, you would be looking for a score of 12 or more. So that's how we would approach it. As with the DLA, if you if you felt that you would like some support filling this form in, there are a variety of places that you can go, but we are one of the organisations that can assist you to help this. Whereas we would only scribe what you say. We would potentially ask some questions, and maybe ask some questions that you'd not thought about linked to the question. However, we would only ever scribe exactly what you say in that form. It's good to be noted that the moving around component is not just physical for a physical disability, you can also be considered for that if you have a cognitive or a mental health condition. If you sort of mostly you would be invited to an assessment. Now, most recently, it's been funny with COVID, but we have been hearing mostly of telephone assessments lately. However, we know previously people have had home visits, they've been invited to go to assessment centres and also video calls as well. I always encourage people that if you care for somebody and they are likely to get deeply distressed by needing to have contact with somebody, such as somebody come to do a home visit, if maybe the way that they present themselves when they're feeling in danger is to actually physically be violent, or maybe they might just go to the bedroom and refuse to come out. It's always important that you make that really clear when you're sort of filling in the form. There is an area on the form asking about assessment, and I put it extra provisions required, but also, you know, give examples previously of when the person has sort of struggled to communicate and engage with other people, so just so they know how that person is likely to be. You normally get a decision letter advising of, well, you always do, of the points awarded. It's very descriptive, and it will clearly say why they have made that decision. If you disagree with that decision, then the first thing to do would be looking at a mandatory reconsideration. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, brilliant. Okay, that was the longest slide, so don't worry. Okay, so for both personal, for DLA and personal dependent payments, if you disagree with their decision on their award, then the first port of call would be mandatory reconsideration. You'd be looking at this if you think that Department of Work and Pension may have made an error or missed some relevant information that you'd already submitted. And that you want them to look at it again. There's a variety of ways you can submit this. You can telephone them. You can use a print sort of a letter tool that they have online, or you could write a letter yourself. You must apply for a mandatory reconsideration within 1 month of the decision letter. It might be that letter's been taken a little while to get to you. However, it must be within that month of the date of the letter, not when you received it. There are a few circumstances where they would sort of be a bit more lenient, such as if you have been in hospital, if you've been abroad or sort of on holiday, you could request a little bit longer to prepare. Okay, I would normally suggest that you would use either sort of a letter or the printable form. If it is a very simple admission where they hadn't taken note of maybe a report, which strongly supports areas where they hadn't sort of agreed that your child has challenges, then that could be done quite easily over a telephone. But I would always say try and get it on paper, because then you know, sort of you've got evidence there. So with personal independent payment, you get that letter, you get the points, it tells you exactly why they've made that decision. DLA is slightly different. You can request a written statement for reasons, but once you've received that for the DLA, you only have then 14 days from the printed date on that letter, from that report, to then file your mandatory reconsideration. At that time, you can also submit additional supportive evidence. So it might be that you ask somebody else, sort of maybe somebody from college or school, or a health professional that you hadn't already asked for a report. You may submit them at those times. Beyond mandatory reconsideration, you would then be looking at appeal. That is not something that we are experienced with, so we would always signpost you over to other organisations such as Citizens Advice for that. Next slide, please.
Hi, yes. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Disability Students Allowance, known as DSA. For those of you with children with disabilities, the very thought of them going on to higher education can be absolutely terrifying. From my own experience, I know that to be true. The Disability Students Allowance, it is non-means tested, and it's there specifically to support any study-related costs for an undergraduate or postgraduate student, but in England. And it's entirely needs-based. Currently, the current year from 22 to 23, a student could get the maximum of £25,575 a year towards their studies, which is obviously at the highest level. Most students that people that are wanting to go to university probably won't get quite that high amount. Very straightforward eligibility. The first thing it's important to note is that the student can't be on an alternatively funded course. For example, some students applying for NHS courses get an extra bursary, which also includes disability student allowance within that as well. But always double check with Student Finance England as well. The course must be at least 1 year long, which obviously is the case with a lot of postgraduate courses. And there must be a diagnosis letter from a medical professional. That can be a whole variety of medical professionals: GPs, consultants, psychiatrists, occupational therapists, physiotherapists. They're all taken into consideration. It's quite straightforward to apply for. So as part of the application for student finance through Student Finance England, there's a section when you fill the online form which it will say, do you have a disability? And then will indicate if you're interested in applying for DSA. At a later stage, once that application's gone through, you will be asked to submit the evidence from the medical professional. On the basis of that, you will then get forwarded to an external assessment agency who you will then liaise with to make an appointment for their assessment for DSA. So the DSA covers 3 main areas, which can obviously be overlapping, as with other benefits. So it covers what is known as disabilities or any long-term health conditions, mental health conditions, and specific learning disabilities, including things like dyslexia, dyscalculia, things like that. It can be used for a whole variety of things. For example, any specific specialist equipment that may be required. If the young person doesn't have a laptop or printer, that can be provided, and it is a very, very high spec, and that's why you need to pay the first £200. But again, from my own personal experience, they are very good. And alongside that, as part of the assessment, the young person will also get assessed as to what software they may need, and you get full online training before the young person starts at university with that. Additionally, the young person can get access to non-medical helpers, and I put there as an example a British Sign Language interpreter, but there's lots of other things as well. And then one-to-one support for up to 1 hour a week. Now, if a young person is moving away from home, again, very anxiety-causing for a lot of parents, the one-to-one support can be for 2 things, really. First of all, it can be maybe supporting a young person with a mental health condition, and the assessor will be trained in that. Or more likely, it's things like study-related issues. The young person finds it difficult to organise themselves, their timetable, when to get their essays in, things like that. And that usually tends to be 1 hour a week, either online or in person, depending on the university involved. Another area can be travel costs. Again, some people probably don't realise it, but travel costs can be included in DSA. And that could be, again, for a whole variety of reasons. It could be that the person has a severe physical disability or mental health issues, meaning that, or a condition such as autism, which means that they get very distressed when they have to go on public transport to and from university, or placements, things like that. So travel costs can also be taken into consideration, as can stationery costs, but it's up to the young person to keep receipts of all those. They can take they can take screenshots of those, or just collect them and then send them in at the end of the year. Because certainly, from my own experience and my children, ink cartridges particularly, as you know, they're very, very expensive. So the needs assessment with the external provider is absolutely nothing to worry about. I know Claire was talking earlier about how the fear of going, having the PIP assessor. It's not like that at all. The person there is basically goes beyond, beyond really to give you whatever support that you need. Very thorough assessment, very, very relaxed, friendly environment, and it's around about an hour to an hour and a half, depending on needs. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please.
So looking at carers allowance now, that's always something that people are unsure about whether they can claim, but sort of there's one element that I really want to highlight to you in a minute. Some of you may actually be eligible for it and not actually in receipt of it. So let's just go through the eligibility. So you must be over 16. You must provide over 35 hours of care. The person you care for must be in receipt of the care component of PIP. That's either standard or enhanced rate, or the middle or high care rate of DLA. You cannot apply for carers allowance for a certain person if somebody else is already claiming carers allowance for that person. So there can't be two people applying for the same person. And the same if somebody is already receiving universal credit elements, if you care for a severely disabled person, and someone else is already claiming that, then you cannot apply for carers allowance. You cannot be in full-time education or studying over 21 hours. And this is sometimes a little golden nuggets. The one at the end, earnings are less than £132, but that is per week after tax, NI and expenses. It's the expenses which people don't always know that they they can claim for, and the thing with the expenses is you can claim up to 50% of your earnings if you pay that amount for care costs. So you can claim your care costs up to 50% of your earnings, which then would reduce your overall earnings for that, and hopefully open up applying for carers allowance for some people. Other things that you can class for expenses can be things like business costs, such as if you're self-employed, if you're only going to be using a laptop purely for work, then you could claim that against it as expenses as well. And if you apply for carers allowance, it can be backdated up to 3 months as well. The only thing with carers allowance you've got to be aware of as well is it can affect other benefits. It's not always the case if you've you've got somebody living at home who's quite young. However, you need to be aware that if that cared for is receiving pension credit or severe disability premium, they will stop. Those benefits will stop if somebody applies for carers allowance. And it could also affect carers allowance council tax discount as well. Have the next slide, please. Very briefly, carers credit. This sort of fills the gap in your NI contribution. So it could be that you're earning too much to claim for carers allowance. However, you're not currently paying national insurance. So carers credit will pay your stamp, and the eligibility for this is if you're 16 years or older and under state pension, you care for 20 hours a week. More often than not, they'd look at the person, if the person cares for that you care for receives mid or high rate care in DLA or any of the daily living components and personal independent payments. But also, if it's very, very rare for parent carers. However, if the person you care for is not in receipt of either of those benefits, you could ask a health or social care professional to complete something called a care certificate, just to prove that you do care for 20 hours or more for the person. Income savings and investments do not affect eligibility for this, for the carers credit. And sort of, if you're already receiving carers allowance, then sort of your NI contribution is already paid, so you don't have to apply for this. In addition to that, also if you're receiving child benefit for a child under 12 or a foster carer, then sort of you don't need to apply. Foster carers do need to apply for national insurance credits instead of that. But if you're receiving child benefit for a child under 12, then you are already getting that NI contribution. It's quite simple to apply for this just via a printable form off the internet, or you could phone the Department of Work and Pensions for a copy. Next slide, please.
Hi, I'm going to briefly talk about the Cheshire West and Chester Blue Badge Scheme. This is actually a national scheme, but it's administered by local authorities. So each local authority will have a slightly different scheme. With Cheshire West and Chester, it's quite straightforward to apply online via their website. So it's basically a national parking scheme for people with disabilities or health problems. There are two types of eligibility, basically. I'll talk a little bit more about the automatic eligibility and just briefly mention some of the possible eligibility criteria as well, because that's more complex, really. So for automatic eligibility for a blue badge, the person must be either severely sight impaired or blind, and obviously will be then dependent on others to move them around in a vehicle. They must receive the high rate of mobility under DLA, score 8 or more points in the moving around section of PIP, or 10 or more points in the planning and following journey section of PIP, or have a diagnosis of terminal cancer. So all those will get you an automatic eligibility for the blue badge. There's a whole range of other criteria that can be taken into consideration to be eligible for the blue badge scheme, and some of those are listed on the right of the screen, so I'll obviously let you have a look at that yourselves rather than going into detail. The one I will mention is that some people perhaps think, because my child's got a hidden disability, I can't apply for a blue badge. That was something that was possibly the case a few years ago, but now certainly, if you have a child, say, with autism or behavioural challenges, and they act outside in sort of ways that maybe are in danger to them or other people, or they're fearful of open or public spaces, then that would also give you possible eligibility for the blue badge scheme as well. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay. So again, a national scheme, but administered locally by Cheshire West and Chester Council, is the council tax reduction scheme. Some people may not be aware of this, that you're actually eligible for this, but there are very distinct criteria to get this. It can mean a reduction of around 10% in the council tax band of a property where either one or more disabled persons live. Certainly before COVID, they were possible housing inspections just to make sure that you were fulfilling the criteria within your home. You'd need to contact Cheshire West Council to check, what's in place now. So the eligibility is that the disabled person or persons, they must require specific additional rooms for their therapeutic or day-to-day needs. And the property must have at least one of the following. A second bathroom, and that's typically often an adapted wet room, for example, for somebody with a wheelchair, an adapted kitchen, or for some young people, a specific therapy room for therapy or medical equipment, or that the disabled person uses the wheelchair within the home. There's also eligibility if your child or young person is termed as severely learning disabled, and again, you'll need a certificate from a GP or consultant for that. But if you read the rules around this, they're pretty complex, so I would strongly suggest you contact the LEA for eligibility and any percentage discount for this thing there. Okay, thank you very much. Next slide, yes.
Okay, don't worry, we're coming to the end now. Okay, so just going to, before we share the links and contact details with you, just really a whistle-stop tour of our services to you. So on the left-hand side, there are main services, and they are for any carer, any unpaid carer over the age of 18, not just for parent carers. So we can help with people sort of who want help with disability benefit forms. As I said, we would scribe what you tell us, we would question and maybe try and then help your applications to have that a little bit more evidence than you might have thought to write down. So we would sort of encourage you to answer those questions a bit more thorough sometimes. Although I do know there's an awful lot of parent carers who very, very successfully apply for benefits without any help, but sort of we are one of the organisations that can help. Some people prefer to have a go and then just bring them to us and say, can you have a look, is there anything else that I've missed here? So we can do that for you as well. And if you've just got a question, sort of you just contact us and maybe we can answer that quickly on the phone for you. We sort of as an organisation offer information, advice, support. So we're aware of what other support other organisations provide as well, and we can always signpost you to the best possible place for that. And be there for emotional support as well. Sometimes a lot of our carers just say that just talking to somebody who doesn't actually know them well, who isn't family members or friends, it really does benefit them. We've got sort of a personal budget, which is a grant which all carers, all unpaid carers can apply for. That is an amount of money up to £200 for you to spend on you. You are unable to spend it with the person you care for, and we ask for receipts sort of to prove that you have used the money as agreed with us when you apply for it. People tend to use it on a variety of things. So some people like to use it over a period of 6 months for such things as gym memberships, art classes, general well-being, hobbies. Other people like to use it for things like a theatre night, meals out, things like that. And you don't have to spend it all in one go. You can spend it over a period of time, over up to 6 months, and then just send us the receipts to prove what you've spent it on. We've also got the Essentials Fund. That is an amount of money up to £250, and neither of these are means tested. So the Essential Fund is for an essential item, mostly in the house. So we're thinking white goods, so fridge, freezer, washing machine, tumble dryer, microwave. Also sometimes things like carpet. I know some carers have asked for help buying a mattress for themselves. It can't be something specifically for the person you care for. So it's to make a difference for you. So such as applying for a carpet for the person you care for's bedroom, that would not meet the criteria there. We have an emergency card, and that is a contingency plan in case of an emergency. So you register up to 3 people to be contacted, and we send you out like a credit card and a key fob. In case of an emergency, that highlights as a vulnerable person reliant on you. And there is a telephone number, and there's like a credit card number on the card. So if worst case scenario, you're unconscious, they'd phone the number, quote the code, and that would activate those people you've asked to be contacted to make sure the person you care for is looked after. And there's also spaces, if required, not everybody needs it, for such people as a social worker to be put on there as well. We have general support groups for anybody to attend who are unpaid carer. We have specific parent carer support groups. In Cheshire West, we have one in Ellesmere Port. I was there this morning, and we had a nice therapy session. And those who wanted to, we did a craft of decorating plant pot holders, and a good natter and a coffee as well, which is the most important thing. We've also have them in Chester, mostly meet at Upton Pavilion for the Chester ones, and mostly meet at the boat shed in Ellesmere Port, and we have one in Northwich as well at our office. We have carers in employment, so for those of you here who work daytime, we also have carers in employment, evening Zooms and evening meetups for tea, and a chat to support one another. And we can also advise you if you've got any sort of issues with your employment linked to your caring role as well. There's a variety of carer breaks, daytime, evening, all sort of on our newsletters that go out. We send out an email blog every 2 weeks, so if you'd like to register for that, then you can do, and a variety of training as well. I know we've got things like first aid coming up on that. And then on the right hand side, very, very, very briefly, is our new parent carer project. So we do a lot of what I've already said, but more specifically for parent carers. We also do self-advocacy courses. We've held one in Winsford and a really successful one in Ellesmere Port recently as well. We can provide careers information, sort of education, sort of questions. We can often help with sort of talking through the EHCP process, things like that. And we have a variety of carer breaks. I'm going to be arranging for a nice brunch out shortly. Training is, so this project is very much parent carer led. So one of the things that some of the carers said that they really struggle is balancing that anxiety with their eating. And so we're going to have a food and mood session in a couple of weeks' time, where we're looking about sort of the psychological aspects and how to prepare for when we're going to be sort of when that anxiety hits and the stresses. Sort of as parent carers, I myself know that, you know, sort of we have an awful lot of stress and anxiety a lot of the time, and it sort of we're going to focus on sort of how we can improve our eating for those times. So if you want to, can we have the next slide, please? Okay, so here's some of the links. So it's our website at the top. Then we've got the benefits advice, some really, really good information that we often go to ourselves when we're supporting people there. So we've got Citizens Advice, Style House, Contact a Family, and Cereba. Then we've got benefits calculator to turn to us. We would always recommend that people check every 12 to 18 months and check that they are receiving all benefits they're eligible for. That PIP descriptors the citizens advice that I mentioned, that's a really good resource there to have, and then the links for the council, the Cheshire West sort of council things as well. Is there one more slide? There we go. So these are contact details. If you've got a quick question, the quickest way, the easiest way to get that answered is to actually contact us via the helpline. We answer Monday to Friday, 9 till 5. And if sort of it's not convenient to do that, or you just want to email, and then the advice at CheshireWarringtonCarers.org is again the way to get a quick response. Both myself and Clare Gallagher work part-time, so you know, we will always respond to emails as quickly as we can, but it may take a few days to get back to you. So that's the end of our presentation. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, the Clares. That was absolutely fantastic. I think I know I've learned a lot, and I can't stress enough. It's very recent in my mind. Josh is going through his PIP, and we had I met with one of your wonderful members of your team who'd been supporting me for a number of years to help complete it yesterday. And she just asked me questions that I just wouldn't have even thought about getting him dressed and how long it took. And she, you know, really useful, poignant questions that made me think about all the things that I just take for granted and do as a daily part of my routine. You know, the daily battles that one has. And she just got it all out of my head without me feeling disloyal, and wrote it down for me. So I really can recommend. I can't recommend you guys highly enough. You've been absolutely brilliant supporting me and my family over the last 15 years. So please do get in contact with them. That was a really useful presentation, I think, for everybody. So thanks ever so much. Right, with that note in mind, is there